The desert wind carried the scent of cordite and blood across the abandoned compound in eastern Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos pressed her back against the crumbling concrete wall, her medical bag clutched tightly in her dirt-stained hands. The firefight had ended 20 minutes ago, but the silence that followed felt more dangerous than the bullets that had been flying moments before. "Corpsman up!" The call echoed through the rubble-strewn courtyard where Navy SEAL Team 6 had just completed what should have been a routine intelligence-gathering mission. Maria sprinted toward the voice, her boots crunching on broken glass and debris. 3 SEALs knelt around a 4th figure sprawled near an overturned table. Blood pooled beneath the wounded operator's left leg, dark and spreading fast. "What do we have?" Maria dropped to her knees, already pulling supplies from her bag. The injured SEAL was conscious but pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool desert air. "Shrapnel to the femoral," reported Petty Officer First Class Jake Morrison, the team leader. "Happened when that last IED went off near the back entrance." Maria's trained hands moved swiftly, cutting away the tactical pants to expose the wound. The metal fragment had torn through muscle and nicked the artery. Not immediately life-threatening if treated quickly, but serious enough to require immediate evacuation. She applied pressure with sterile gauze while reaching for her tourniquet. "Radio for extraction," she ordered without looking up. "We need a bird here in 15 minutes or less." As she worked to stabilize the wounded SEAL, Maria became aware of movement in her peripheral vision. Near the far corner of the compound, partially hidden behind a collapsed doorway, a figure stirred. At first glance, it appeared to be just another civilian casualty from the firefight. The person wore traditional Afghan clothing, a long tunic and loose pants, both torn and blood-stained. "Boss, we got another wounded over here," called out Petty Officer Second Class Tommy Chen from across the courtyard. Maria looked up from her patient. The tourniquet was in place and the bleeding controlled. "Can you move him?" she asked the team leader, referring to the SEAL she was treating. "Yeah, we got him. Go check the civilian." Maria gathered her remaining supplies and jogged across the compound toward Chen's position. The figure on the ground was slight, maybe 5'6", with dark hair matted with dust and blood. Traditional Afghan clothing made it difficult to determine much else in the dim light filtering through the damaged roof above. "Where's the injury?" Maria asked as she knelt down. "Upper chest. Looks like a through and through," Chen reported. "Breathing's a little shallow but steady." Maria gently rolled the figure onto their back to assess the wound. As she did, her hands detected something unexpected beneath the loose-fitting tunic. The body structure felt different than she had anticipated. Her training kicked in as she began a systematic examination, but something made her pause. The facial features, despite being covered in dirt and partially obscured by the traditional head covering, seemed delicate. The bone structure of the jaw and cheekbones suggested something her initial assessment had missed. Maria's pulse quickened as realization began to dawn. "Chen, get me more light," she said quietly. The SEAL produced a tactical flashlight and aimed it downward. In the clearer illumination, Maria could see what she had initially missed. This wasn't a typical civilian casualty. The hands, while calloused and weathered, were smaller and more refined than she had first noticed. The facial features, now that she could see them clearly, were unmistakably feminine despite the traditional covering. But that wasn't what made Maria's breath catch in her throat. As she carefully examined the wound in the upper chest, her trained eye spotted something that made her heart skip a beat. There, partially visible beneath the torn fabric of the tunic, was a small tattoo on the collarbone. It was simple but distinctive, an anchor with wings, the symbol of naval aviation. Maria's mind raced. American military personnel didn't just end up in Afghan villages wearing traditional clothing unless something had gone very wrong. She looked more closely at the woman's features, trying to piece together what she was seeing. "Ma'am?" she said softly, speaking in English for the first time since approaching the wounded figure. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were green, an unusual color for someone from this region. When their gazes met, Maria saw something she recognized immediately. The look of a fellow service member, alert, assessing, calculating even while wounded. "American?" the woman whispered in accented English. But Maria caught something in the pronunciation that suggested the accent might not be authentic. "Yes, we're American military. You're safe now," Maria replied, continuing her examination of the chest wound. The bullet had indeed passed through the upper chest, missing any vital organs but causing significant soft tissue damage. As she worked, she noticed other details that didn't add up. The woman's physical condition was too good for a typical civilian. Despite her wounded state, Maria could tell she was in excellent physical shape. Her muscle tone and the way she held herself, even while lying on the ground, suggested extensive physical training. More telling were the small scars Maria noticed on the woman's hands and forearms as she cleaned the wounds. They weren't the random scars of hard civilian life, but rather the precise marks that came from tactical training, rope work, fast roping, combat training. Maria had seen similar scars on her own hands, and those of countless operators she had treated over her 5 years as a Navy corpsman. "What's your name?" Maria asked quietly, glancing around to make sure the other SEALs were focused on their own tasks. The woman hesitated for a long moment, her green eyes studying Maria's face intently. "Farah," she finally said, but again Maria detected something off about the pronunciation. "Farah," Maria repeated, applying fresh gauze to the entry wound. "How long have you been in this village?" Another pause. "Many years," came the reply, but the woman's eyes darted away as she spoke. Maria had treated enough wounded personnel to recognize evasion when she heard it. This woman was hiding something, and given the tattoo, the physical condition, and the careful way she was answering questions, Maria had a growing suspicion about what that something might be. As she wrapped the chest wound, Maria made a decision that went against standard protocol. Instead of immediately reporting her observations to the team leader, she leaned closer to the wounded woman and spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Lieutenant," she said, using the rank she suspected rather than knew, "I'm Corpsman Santos, United States Navy. If you're who I think you are, we're going to get you out of here." The woman's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and Maria saw her jaw tighten. For a moment, the careful mask slipped, and Maria caught a glimpse of the military bearing beneath the civilian disguise. "I don't know what you mean," the woman replied, but her voice carried less conviction than before. Maria finished securing the bandage and sat back slightly. She had been in enough combat zones to recognize a fellow warrior when she saw one, regardless of what they were wearing or what cover story they were maintaining. The question now was whether this woman was American military, operating under deep cover, or something else entirely. "Extracts inbound, 2 minutes," Morrison called from across the compound. Maria looked toward the team leader, then back at the wounded woman. She had a choice to make, and it had to be now. Either this person was exactly what she appeared to be, a wounded civilian who would be left for local medical care, or she was something much more significant that could change the entire dynamic of their mission. The sound of rotor blades began to echo off the mountains in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Maria made her decision. "Morrison," she called out, "we need to take this one with us. Medical emergency. She won't survive without immediate surgical intervention." It wasn't entirely true. The chest wound, while serious, wasn't immediately life-threatening with proper field treatment. But Maria had a gut feeling that leaving this woman behind would be a mistake they would all regret. The team leader jogged over, his expression questioning. "Civilian?" he asked. Maria met his gaze steadily. "Unknown at this time. but she needs advanced medical care that we can provide. Morrison studied the wounded woman for a moment, taking in the same details Maria had observed. As an experienced operator, he had learned to trust his team members' instincts, especially when it came to medical assessments. "All right," he said finally, "load her up with Johnson." He was referring to the wounded SEAL they were already evacuating. As the helicopter touched down in the compound's central courtyard, Maria helped prepare both patients for transport. The wounded SEAL was loaded first, still conscious and stable. As they lifted the woman onto the second stretcher, she gripped Maria's wrist with surprising strength for someone who had just been shot. "Thank you," she said in clear, unaccented English. Maria squeezed the woman's hand in response. Whatever was really going on here, she was certain of one thing. This was no ordinary civilian casualty. As the helicopter lifted off into the star-filled Afghan sky, carrying them toward the forward operating base, Maria wondered what secrets the wounded woman was carrying and why she had been in that compound when the shooting started. The flight to the base would take 20 minutes. 20 minutes for Maria to try to piece together the puzzle of who this woman really was and what her presence in that village might mean for everyone involved. As she monitored both patients' vital signs during the flight, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that this rescue was about to complicate their mission in ways none of them could have anticipated. The forward operating base's medical facility hummed with controlled urgency as Maria wheeled the mystery woman into Trauma Bay 2. The wounded SEAL had already been taken to surgery, his injuries requiring immediate attention from the base's trauma surgeon. But Maria found herself equally concerned about their other patient, whose identity remained frustratingly unclear. "What do we have here?" Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the base's chief medical officer, appeared at Maria's shoulder as she began transferring the woman to the examination table. "Gunshot wound to the upper chest through and through. Vitals are stable, but she's lost some blood. Found her at the compound during the firefight," Maria reported in crisp, professional terms. She deliberately omitted her suspicions about the woman's true identity. Dr. Mitchell began her own examination, her experienced hands checking pulse points and examining the wound channels. "Any identification?" "None found," Maria replied truthfully. They hadn't discovered any documents or identification during their hasty evacuation. As Dr. Mitchell worked, Maria stepped back but remained in the trauma bay, ostensibly to assist, but really to observe. The woman had been conscious during the helicopter flight but had said little, maintaining her role as a local civilian despite Maria's growing certainty that she was anything but. "Ma'am, I'm Dr. Mitchell," the physician said in slow, clear English as she examined the chest wound. "You're at an American medical facility. You're safe." The woman nodded weakly, her green eyes tracking the doctor's movements with an alertness that seemed inconsistent with her supposed background. Maria noticed how the woman's gaze systematically cataloged the medical equipment, the layout of the room, and the positions of everyone present. It was the kind of tactical awareness that came from extensive training. "Farah," the woman said when asked for her name, maintaining the identity she had given earlier. "Well, Farah, you're very lucky. The bullet missed anything vital. We're going to clean and dress the wound, give you some antibiotics, and you should heal up just fine." As Dr. Mitchell prepared to clean the wound more thoroughly, she began cutting away more of the torn tunic. Maria tensed, knowing what the doctor was about to discover. "Interesting," Dr. Mitchell murmured as she exposed the small tattoo on the woman's collarbone. "That's a Navy aviation symbol." The woman's eyes darted to Maria, then back to the doctor. "Old boyfriend," she said quickly. "American soldier. Long time ago." Dr. Mitchell raised an eyebrow but continued her work. "Must have been quite a relationship to get a military tattoo." Maria moved closer under the pretense of handing Dr. Mitchell additional supplies. "Doctor, there are a few other things you should know about our patient," she said carefully. Before she could continue, The trauma bay door burst open and Morrison entered, followed by Lieutenant Colonel James Carter, the base's intelligence officer. Carter was a lean man in his 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "How's our civilian?" Morrison asked, though his tone suggested he suspected she was anything but civilian. "Stable," Dr. Mitchell replied, "though there are some interesting inconsistencies." Carter stepped closer to the examination table, his gaze taking in the same details Maria and Dr. Mitchell had noticed. His expression grew more serious as he studied the woman's face. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Carter. I need to ask you some questions about what happened at that compound." The woman maintained eye contact with Carter, her expression carefully neutral. "I live in village. Heard shooting. Tried to hide. Got hurt." Carter's eyes narrowed slightly. Something about the woman's demeanor was setting off his intelligence officer instincts. "Which village exactly? We've been operating in this area for months, and I know most of the local populations." A momentary hesitation. "Small village. North of compound." "What's the name of the village elder?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Ahmad." Carter exchanged a glance with Morrison. There was indeed a village to the north, but its elder was named Rashid, not Ahmad. More importantly, that village had been evacuated weeks ago due to Taliban activity in the area. "Farah," Carter said, his voice taking on a more authoritative tone. "I'm going to need you to be completely honest with me. Who are you really?" The woman's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Maria could see the internal struggle playing out behind her green eyes. The cover story was falling apart under scrutiny, but breaking character could have serious consequences. Dr. Mitchell had finished cleaning and dressing the wound. "She's stable for transport if you need to move her," she said to Carter, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with the direction the interrogation was taking. "That won't be necessary," Carter replied. "At least not yet." He pulled a chair close to the examination table and sat down, his posture less threatening but still official. "Listen, whoever you are, you're safe here. But I need to understand what you were doing in that compound and why you're carrying American military tattoos." Maria watched as the woman seemed to weigh her options. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before the woman finally spoke. "My name is not Farah," she said quietly, her accent completely gone. The voice that emerged was clearly American, with just a hint of a southern drawl. Carter leaned forward. "What is your name?" "Lieutenant Sarah Elizabeth Connor, United States Navy." The room went completely silent. Morrison's hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm, while Dr. Mitchell stepped back in surprise. Maria felt her pulse quicken. She had suspected the woman was military, but hearing it confirmed out loud made it real in a way that was both relieving and terrifying. "Service number?" Carter demanded. Connor rattled off a 9-digit number without hesitation. Carter pulled out his secure communication device and stepped away from the table, speaking in low, urgent tones. Morrison remained at Connor's bedside, his expression a mix of confusion and suspicion. "Lieutenant," Morrison said, "what the hell were you doing in that compound dressed like a local?" Connor closed her eyes for a moment, as if making a final decision about how much to reveal. "I'm assigned to a classified unit, deep reconnaissance. I've been operating in this region for 8 months." 8 months? Dr. Mitchell sounded incredulous. "You've been living under cover for 8 months?" "Something like that." Connor's responses were becoming more guarded now that her cover was blown. "I can't discuss operational details without proper authorization." Carter returned to the group, his expression grim. "I've confirmed her identity. Lieutenant Connor is indeed Navy, assigned to a unit that officially doesn't exist." He fixed Connor with a hard stare. "What I can't confirm is what you were doing in that specific compound at the exact time we happened to raid it." Connor met his gaze steadily. "Wrong place, wrong time, Colonel. I was using the compound as a temporary shelter. When your team breached, I took cover and got caught in the crossfire. Bullshit, Morrison said bluntly. That compound was under surveillance for weeks. If you were using it regularly, we would have known. Connor's expression remained unchanged. I said I was using it as temporary shelter, not that I was living there. I move frequently. Maria could see the tension in the room ratcheting up. Carter clearly didn't believe Connor's explanation, and Morrison was looking increasingly suspicious. Dr. Mitchell appeared caught between her medical duty to her patient and growing concern about the security implications. "Colonel," Connor said, "I need to contact my handler. There are protocols for this situation." "I'm sure there are," Carter replied. "But until I understand what's really going on here, you're not contacting anyone." "Sir, with respect, you don't have the authority to hold me. I'm a commissioned officer in the United States Navy." Carter's smile was thin and humorless. "Lieutenant, you've been operating without identification in a hostile area, wearing civilian clothes, and were found at a suspected enemy facility during a classified operation. Until I can verify your story and understand how your presence affects our mission security, you're going to remain right here." Connor started to protest, but Carter held up a hand. "This isn't a prison, Lieutenant, but it's not optional either. Dr. Mitchell, I need you to keep our patient under observation for medical reasons. 24 hours minimum." Dr. Mitchell looked uncomfortable with the request, but nodded. "I can justify medical observation given her injuries and the circumstances of her rescue." "Good." Carter turned back to Connor. "Lieutenant, I strongly suggest you use the next 24 hours to remember anything else about your mission that might be relevant to our operations, because tomorrow, you and I are going to have a much longer conversation." As Carter and Morrison left the trauma bay, Maria lingered under the pretense of cleaning up medical supplies. Connor watched her with calculating eyes. "Corpsman Santos," Connor said quietly once they were alone with Dr. Mitchell, who was updating medical charts at the far end of the room. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you for getting me out of there." Maria nodded. "Just doing my job, Lieutenant." "No," Connor said, her voice serious. "What you did was more than your job. You made a call based on instinct, and it probably saved my life." Maria finished packing her medical bag. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "You can ask." "Were you really just in the wrong place at the wrong time?" Connor studied Maria's face for a long moment before responding. "Corpsman, there are things about this situation that are more complicated than anyone here realizes. The next 24 hours are going to be very interesting for all of us." "What does that mean?" Before Connor could answer, Dr. Mitchell approached with a sedative. "Lieutenant, you need rest. Your body has been through significant trauma." Connor accepted the medication without protest, but her eyes remained alert as the sedative began to take effect. "Santos," she said as her eyelids grew heavy, "tell me something. That compound we were in, did your team find what they were looking for?" Maria frowned. "I don't know what we were looking for, ma'am. Intelligence gathering, that's all I was told." Connor's smile was enigmatic as sleep began to claim her. "Then things are about to get very complicated indeed." As Connor drifted off, Maria found herself with more questions than answers. Who was Lieutenant Connor really? What was her actual mission? And most importantly, what did she mean when she said things were about to get complicated? Outside the medical facility, the desert wind continued to blow, carrying with it the sense that the rescue of one wounded woman was about to change everything for everyone involved. Maria's shift ended at 600 hours, but she found herself unable to sleep. The questions surrounding Lieutenant Connor gnawed at her as she lay in her bunk, staring at the canvas ceiling of the temporary housing unit. Something about the entire situation felt wrong, and her instincts, as both a medic and a sailor, were telling her that Connor's story was only the beginning of something much larger. At 800, she made her way back to the medical facility under the pretense of checking on both patients from the previous night's mission. The wounded SEAL was recovering well from surgery and would be evacuated to Germany within the next 48 hours. Connor, however, presented a more complex case. "She's been awake for 2 hours," Dr. Mitchell informed Maria as she entered the medical bay. "Vitals are good, wound is clean, no signs of infection. Physically, she could be discharged today." "But she's not being discharged," Maria observed. "Colonel Carter's orders. Extended observation." Dr. Mitchell's tone suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with the arrangement. Maria found Connor sitting up in her hospital bed, dressed in standard-issue medical scrubs. Her green eyes were alert and focused, tracking every movement in the medical bay. She looked like a caged animal, ready to bolt at the first opportunity. "How are you feeling, your Lieutenant?" Maria asked as she approached the bed. "Like I need to get out of here," Connor replied without hesitation. "Santos, I need you to help me contact someone." "Ma'am, I can't do that. Colonel Carter was very specific about communications restrictions." Connor's expression grew more intense. "Listen to me very carefully. Every minute I'm stuck in this bed, people are dying. My mission isn't some academic intelligence gathering exercise. There are American lives at stake." Before Maria could respond, Morrison entered the medical bay accompanied by Carter and another man Maria didn't recognize. The stranger was tall and lean, with the kind of precise bearing that suggested special operations background. He wore no visible rank insignia, which in Maria's experience meant he was either very important or very dangerous. "Lieutenant Connor," Carter said as the trio approached her bed, "I'd like you to meet Agent David Walsh from the Defense Intelligence Agency." Walsh stepped forward, his gray eyes studying Connor with professional interest. "Lieutenant, we need to have a conversation about your activities in this region." "Finally," Connor said, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Agent Walsh, I assume you've been briefed on my mission parameters?" "I've been briefed on what your unit thinks your mission parameters are," Walsh replied carefully. "What I need to understand is what you've actually been doing out there." Connor glanced around the medical bay, noting the presence of Maria and Dr. Mitchell. "This conversation should be classified." "Corpsman Santos and Dr. Mitchell have been read into the situation," Carter said. "They're cleared for this discussion." Walsh pulled a chair close to Connor's bed and sat down. "Lieutenant, 3 days ago, a high-value target was eliminated in a drone strike approximately 15 kilometers from where you were found. Intelligence suggests this individual was planning a major attack against coalition forces. What can you tell me about that?" Connor's expression remained carefully neutral. "I can tell you that the intelligence was accurate." "How can you tell me that?" "Because I provided it." The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Maria felt her understanding of the situation shift dramatically. Connor hadn't been in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had been exactly where she was supposed to be. Morrison was the first to speak. "You're saying you were the source for that drone strike?" "I'm saying I've been tracking Taliban leadership movements in this region for 8 months. 3 days ago, I confirmed the location of a high-priority target and transmitted that information through proper channels." Walsh leaned forward. "What were you doing in that compound?" "Following up on intelligence that suggested another high-value target might be using it as a meeting location." Connor's voice was steady, professional. "When your team breached, I was conducting surveillance." "Why didn't you identify yourself immediately?" Connor's smile was grim. "Because I wasn't sure if your team had been compromised. The timing of your raid was suspicious." Carter's expression darkened. "What do you mean by that?" "Colonel, that compound has been empty for weeks. Suddenly, on the same night I'm conducting surveillance, a SEAL team just happens to raid it for intelligence gathering. Either that's an incredible coincidence, or someone leaked information about my activities." Walsh and Carter exchanged glances. "What kind of information were you expecting to find at the compound?" Walsh asked. Connor hesitated for the first time since the conversation began. "There's been chatter about a planned attack on this base. Something big. The compound was supposed to be a meeting point for the operational planning." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. An attack on their own base would explain the high level of security surrounding Connor's presence. "When?" Morrison demanded. "Within the next 72 hours based on the intelligence I gathered." Carter was already reaching for his communication device. "Why the hell didn't you lead with that information?" "Because I needed to verify that your team wasn't the source of the leak," Connor replied. "If someone on this base is feeding information to the Taliban, telling you about the planned attack could have accelerated their timeline." Walsh stood up abruptly. "Lieutenant, I need you to tell me everything you know about this planned attack. Right now." Connor looked around the room once more, her gaze settling on Maria. "Corpsman Santos, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell these gentlemen is going to put this entire base on high alert. Your life, and the lives of everyone here, are about to get significantly more dangerous." Maria nodded, though her mouth felt dry. "I understand, ma'am." Connor turned back to Walsh. "The attack is planned for tomorrow night. Approximately 50 fighters, coordinated assault on the main gate and the flight line. The goal is to destroy aircraft and take hostages." "Jesus Christ," Morrison breathed. "There's more," Connor continued. "They have inside information about guard rotations, defensive positions, and the base layout. Someone here has been feeding them intelligence for weeks." Carter's face had gone pale. "Do you know who?" "I have suspicions, but no proof. That's why I needed to be certain about your team before I revealed what I knew." Walsh was already moving toward the door. "Colonel Carter, we need to initiate DEFCON protocols immediately, and I need a complete roster of everyone who had access to base security information over the past month." As Walsh and Carter hurried out of the medical bay, Morrison remained behind with Connor, Maria, and Dr. Mitchell. The SEAL team leader looked shaken by the revelation. "Lieutenant," he said, "if you suspected there was a mole on this base, why didn't you try to contact your handler earlier?" Connor's expression became even more serious. "Because my handler is dead, killed 2 weeks ago in what was reported as an IED explosion. But the timing and location suggest it wasn't random." Maria felt the pieces clicking into place in her mind. "That's why you've been operating without support." "Exactly. My entire command structure has been compromised. For the past 2 weeks, I've been completely on my own trying to figure out who I can trust." Morrison shook his head. "This is way above my pay grade. But, Lieutenant, if you're right about this attack, we need every piece of intelligence you have." "I'll tell you everything," Connor said. "But first, we need to get word to the wounded SEAL who was evacuated. If there's a mole on this base, they'll know he was present during the compound raid. His life could be in danger." Dr. Mitchell, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. "The medical transport left for Germany an hour ago. He's safe." Connor nodded with visible relief. "Good. Now, about the planned attack." For the next 2 hours, Connor provided detailed intelligence about Taliban movements, attack plans, and suspected infiltration routes. Her information was thorough and precise, the result of months of careful observation and intelligence gathering. As the briefing concluded, Morrison stood to leave. "Lieutenant, for what it's worth, I'm sorry we doubted you. And Santos," he turned to Maria, "good call bringing her back with us. You probably saved more than just her life." After Morrison left, Maria found herself alone with Connor and Dr. Mitchell. The weight of everything they had learned was settling in, and Maria realized that her simple decision to treat Connor as more than just a civilian casualty had potentially prevented a catastrophic attack on their base. "Lieutenant," Maria said, "what happens now?" Connor was already getting out of the hospital bed, her movements careful but determined. Now I finish my mission. Walsh will coordinate the base defense, but I still need to identify the source of the intelligence leak. You're not planning to go back out there alone, are you? Dr. Mitchell asked, clearly concerned. Connor's smile was grim but determined. Doctor, I've been alone for weeks, but this time, I think I have some backup. As if summoned by her words, Morrison reappeared in the medical bay doorway. Lieutenant Connor, Colonel Carter wants to see you in the command center, and Santos, he looked at Maria, you're coming too. Apparently, your medical assessment skills extend beyond treating wounds. Maria felt a surge of nervous pride. Whatever happened next, she had played a role in uncovering a serious threat to their base and potentially saving countless lives. As they prepared to leave the medical bay, Connor caught her arm. Santos, thank you for trusting your instincts back at that compound. Sometimes the smallest decisions make the biggest difference. As they walked toward the command center, Maria reflected on how a routine medical evacuation had turned into something much more significant. In a few hours, they would know whether Connor's intelligence was accurate and whether they had successfully prevented a major attack. The desert sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere in those mountains, enemy forces were preparing for an assault that would never come. And it all started because a Navy corpsman had noticed that a wounded civilian wasn't quite what she appeared to be. The next 24 hours would determine whether their intervention had been successful, but Maria already knew that this mission would be remembered as the day when paying attention to details and trusting instincts had made all the difference between life and death for everyone on the base.